Brooke. Welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us today at our Lunch and Learn. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the lands that we are meeting on here today. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of Australia. I acknowledge and pay my respects to our Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people joining us today. So I guess just a quick introduction about DiUS, and thanks, Brooke. For those of us who already know us,
I'm on a
hello
call,
again.
honey. Bolo.
Yeah, just I guess a reminder to maybe stay on mute if that's okay for everyone. For those who are new, I guess just a quick intro on who we are and what we do. So we're a technology consulting company that builds custom software and hardware solutions for clients. We have a unique and broad skill set that spans data, devices, and digital, making us the perfect choice for clients who are looking to build data-driven platforms, ML-powered products, or edge AI solutions that look to solve customer experience, improve customer experience, or solve problems that haven't been solved before. And of course, we're now sort of doing a lot of work and exploration in the new world of generative AI. My name's Anthony Vermeulen. I'm an experience designer at DiUS. Typically, I guess the experience design role is sort of, managing all the design related activities as we go through, the process of designing and building, a technical solution. And obviously more recently, we've been spending a lot of space, really exploring the impacts of, the traditional design and build approach, obviously applying that in the new world of AI. So today we're lucky to be joined by a few special guests who's going to sort of, help us sort of unpack some of the questions around generative AI. We've got Alex Zinoviev, who's a senior product manager at Domain and also the founder of Gen AI Lab for Product Meetup in Sydney. We've also got Alex Young, who's the head of innovation at Lifeblood, who we recently fairly recently just sort of finished up some work in the Gen AI space. And then we've also got Alina Hunter, who's the co-founder of Cleverbean. Again, having a sort of history with DiUS, and we'll actually maybe get Alina to give us some bit of info around the value prop of Cleverbean, which is sort of unique in the AI space. And I guess just going forward, maybe I'll just use Alex Z and Alex Y as a sort of reference just to keep it simple. So yeah, a few things we'll try to cover today. We'll keep it sort of open-ended. I guess around what are we talking about in terms of Gen AI? We'll talk about, I guess, the starting point. So identifying use cases, looking at, how to sort of build that buy-in, moving through the importance of sort of design, product and I guess engineering, even in those early stages. And then, try and touch on some of the, I guess, considerations around responsible implementation, and even, determining whether something's sort of ready to ship or move to production. Maybe to kick off, I think we've got a few polls throughout the Lunch and Learn. I think we'll load up the first one now, Brooke, which I think everyone gets a prompt for, if I'm not mistaken. Let me know if anyone has any issues. Seeing the poll. There we go. So where are you on your generative AI journey? If you can just give us an indication, always good to get a feel for, what sort of, where people are at and how comfortable people are with some of the terminology. There we go. Okay, I think this is a fairly consistent thing that we see. A lot of people obviously exploring use cases. I think it's a hot topic in the market. People know existing use cases. I think it's really kind of matching those two up and figuring out what works and what are the questions that come out of that. So that's good to know. Thank you all. We'll probably put up a few more as we go through the discussion. But with so much to cover, I think we get into it, and maybe we go to Alex Z first. So, Alex, there's still so much hype around what Gen AI can actually do for businesses and individuals. Maybe we can start with some of the most common applications of Gen AI that you're seeing, and which use cases are generating the most excitement or interest among your Gen AI lab for product community. I can't see your face, Alex Z, but if you're on mute, we can't hear you.
Hey, Anthony. Thanks. The most common use cases of Gen AI that I see at the moment are focused mainly around internal productivity use cases. Those are a lot easier to get started with and lower risk. A couple of examples there is, GitHub Copilot, AI coding tool, increasing speed of software delivery by 50%. I see CBA has identified a whole bunch of Gen AI use cases to simplify their operation processes. And I imagine typical use cases for them would be things like extracting data from Excels or PDF files and creating the first draft sort of response to customers. Other probably big area that I see where Gen AI is shining is customer service or customer experience. You probably have seen the news about Klarna AI assistant, handling 2/3 of customer service chats within the first month, which is equivalent of like 700, full-time agents. So the reason why these are popular is because typically most customer questions are, typically simple and they're related to a small number of topics. So it's easier for companies to train their chatbots and deal with them. And then another big area I think is around sales and go to market. You've got solutions like Copy AI or Jasper AI, which marketing teams are adapting and they're using for, increasing quality of content production, increasing the variety of content that they're creating, obviously resulting in better conversions, better lead qualification, better, more website traffic. And look, when I speak to the product people at my community, there's a whole bunch of stuff they're excited about. The latest chatter that we've had was around product innovation and how synthetic user research is going to change how product teams quickly validate their concepts, understand, user preferences, using synthetic users, which would allow teams to test a lot of ideas very quickly and then before they do it with human validation. I think autonomous agents are here. You know, Companies like Relevance AI creating autonomous workforce. They say in the next 24 months, every company is going to have at least one autonomous agent running in their business. And if you haven't seen the latest announcement on ChatGPT this morning, that the AI now has eyes. It can see, it can through your camera, it can understand your surroundings, it can tailor responses appropriately, and it's all happening at the speed of human conversation. So I think that's just mind-boggling improvements that we're experiencing there.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks. Yeah, 100%. Super exciting time. I'm sure for everyone on the call, just working in the tech space, but seeing all the new opportunities. But as the tech, again, just with an announcement this morning, as the technology is still almost in its infancy, we can only imagine, 5, 10 years down the track. So pretty exciting for those with big ideas, I think. Cool. Maybe thanks, Alex. Maybe we'll go to Alex Y. And on our project together, yourself and the business had done some work to actually define some of the use cases. So very, very close to, I guess, real world problems or potential opportunities in the business. Thinking it might be useful for everyone here to sort of understand how you guys landed on those initiatives, and which problems were you trying to solve, and how did you tap into the business to sort of prioritize what was the most valuable to focus on?
Yeah, thanks for that, Anthony. Definitely, Gen AI kind of enters the business in different directions, right? You've got individuals around the business playing with ChatGPT. You've got vendors that are upgrading their own software with Gen AI. And so we've got digital and other parts of the business that are being introduced via vendors to upgrades. And then for the innovation team that I'm in, the approach that we've taken was very much how do we identify the problems to solve in the business. So we took a cross-business approach to doing some ideation workshops, resulting in basically kicking up the dust of problems to solve in the business. Now, the focus was very much around, we've got a strategic theme called our Workplace of Champions, which is all about how do we identify, how do we help our staff do meaningful work. So as Alex said, productivity was the key, and that was the thing that sort of popped out the most. So that sort of kicked up 200 concepts, and we did some value mapping, and we basically worked up the ranks to the innovation board and to the exec to fine tune to 4 that sort of gave a good cross-business representation, largely in the productivity space. Once again, why? Because it was low risk. And then at the same time, it also helped align with the strategic pillars. So that was the starting point, and that's kind of like where Hugh DiUS entered the picture. But yeah, that selection process was very much a question of what are the problems that require Gen AI and didn't require one of the many other technologies that could solve for these problems.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Alex. And I think that's definitely what we're seeing, right? It's obviously there are some really, I guess, future applications for Gen AI or the really funky stuff we can do in the future. But I think what it does really well is what we're learning, and to really see that impact, which, goes back to that. How do you sort of prove that value is, I guess what can be considered the more mundane tasks. Once you sort of get into it, you realize there's a lot more behind the scenes. But I think that's generally a good starting point, because you start to learn about, the context of an AI solution in the business, which already unpacks, I think, a lot more for some of the, future applications. Cool. Maybe we'll go to yourself, Alina. And I didn't give too much info on Cleverbean. I thought I'd let you, just in case I didn't do it justice. But Cleverbean's sort of focused in in the education space. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about your value proposition, and what did Gen AI have to offer that you sort of couldn't get elsewhere or was a bit unique?
Yeah, awesome. So a bit of context on us. We exist to help primary schools improve their literacy. And most of you may not know, but actually almost 50% of the Australian population cannot read or write better than a grade 3 student. So, we kind of probably move in circles of pretty well-educated people, but we have some enormous challenges that we're facing as a society and for individuals. So we're looking to intervene at the earliest stage in primary school to improve that. So just for a bit of extra context, governments provide curriculums to schools, but they don't necessarily provide the explicit support on how to deliver a lesson in the classroom to make sure that they meet those outcomes really well. So the first thing that we did was start to provide really high quality lesson plans to schools and teachers so that we could take workload off them and also make sure that they could see better outcomes and better engagement in their students. So that was kind of part one, but we are our whole thing is around improving literacy. So we started looking at, well, what other parts of the puzzle are there that we can really provide support? And that's when we started to unravel how AI could be really supportive in some of these. So one of the bits of research we're looking into is feedback for students, and how actually in a class of 30 students, which is the average kind of class size for a school, a maximum of 2 students would get feedback in that class, in that lesson, because it's just humanly impossible for a teacher to spend one-on-one time with students as they're doing their independent practice in that kind of time frame. So this seemed like a pretty slam dunk use case to be able to then change that from 2 students in a class to all 30 or 35 getting feedback multiple times during that class. So that's probably the most practical application that we've started using AI for. And yeah, I'll go into that a little bit more as we kind of go through a few more of the questions.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think the super interesting part about that application, I guess, is, a big thing with AI is firstly getting the output right, but how is it interpreted by the user, right? That's become a lot wider thing. And I mean, you know, your application, you're thinking students, you're thinking the education space it's a very something you want to get right, both aspects of that, right? So I think, yeah, really interested to kind of hear a bit more about that design process and how you sort of yeah, tailored the solution. Cool. I think we'll go to our second poll now. Trusty Zoom expert Brooke making all the magic happen in the background. I guess just a shout out. I know I'm sure people should have access to the chat, but yeah, if you've got any questions or any other conversation prompts, any thoughts, feel free to, you know, use the chat. It'd be always good to have a bit of conversation. There might be something we can either try and answer or take away. So yeah, feel free to engage if people have any questions. Cool. So the second poll, what's the biggest challenge you've faced with generative AI?
Just still have a few people still answering. Give it another 10 seconds.
Cool. Okay. Pretty even spread. Well, I think, yeah, the big one there, understanding and setting realistic expectations. I think that is a little bit tricky, especially for those of us who work closely with the technology. You read the headline, but I think once you start looking under the hood, in some ways very refreshing, and you know, you feel a bit better because it's not ready to take over the world. But I think, yeah, managing that's a big thing. I'd be really interested to know if there's anything that wasn't listed in the survey there that maybe people think is a challenge, if people have any other call outs. But thank you again for your responses. Okay, we'll move on. Next question is for Alex Y. So as with any new technology, it can be hard to pick up just one thing that's getting in the way, and especially for industries that are highly regulated. Data privacy is a big one. So can you share any particular hesitations about data privacy or data usage, especially given the sensitive nature of operations in organizations like Lifeblood, and how did you overcome these?
Yeah, thanks for that, Anthony. So, for those that aren't aware, Red Cross Lifeblood, like we're a national collector of blood and blood product manufacturing. So a lot of health data. It's very critical. It's really important to protect. It gets hammered into me every single day. So as a first step, it was avoid that, because you know the journey that we're on, like everyone else, is we're just learning. We don't know about this technology. We don't know where we didn't know at the beginning, like, where does the data go? What does ChatGPT do with our data? So there were a lot of questions. I think that's where the education from various vendors sort of helped us understand. But as a first step for us, it was very much avoid touching anything to do with the health data, and what other data have we got internally from a corporate perspective that we could use to experiment on or to use in a low risk manner. But yes, those initial questions were very much, we don't want to be training. Well, does the document we upload, does it train ChatGPT? Where does the information go? What happens with it? How can we contain it? So we sort of addressed quite a bit of that through the setting up our own instance of Azure GPT, thanks to our ICT team. But nonstop throughout the experience has been the question of, where is the data going, and who is our vendor, and what's their security level like? So cybersecurity, our team have been quite helpful in, because everyone in the whole business is trying to learn at the same time, being part of the journey along the way. So I think the approach that we've taken is very much step by step, and try not to jump into the deep end. And it's been 1 year that we've sort of been exploring this together with the rest of the business. But I think step by step is the right way to go.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Alex. I think certainly, you know, a little bit at Lifeblood and even some other projects, even just having that conversation, right, and getting people asking questions, how are things impacted, I think becomes valuable, because you can start to take those forward again as sort of future considerations. And even on the flip side, thinking about, you know, the interface itself. How do I put my users at comfort that the data that they're inputting, whatever that may be, you know, transparency on how it's going to be used, or you know, what they'll get out of it. So I think it's definitely something that should be talked about and maybe, you know, made a bit more visible now in our experiences. Cool. Okay, Alina, maybe we'll go back to you around, you know, the reliability and the biases that we sort of touched on lightly just before. How did you address that, I guess, in your sort of design process, and what were the guardrails that you put in place?
Yeah, so this is a very valid risk and concern in an educational context, particularly when students are using these tools. So the first principle we worked by to minimize that risk was to get really specific on how we would use it and move away from more generic applications that people and schools may be more familiar with AI. That might have been like developing lesson plans or activities or even assessment frameworks. So we quite deliberately wanted to double down on really tight use cases that that we could then provide assurance and trust to school leaders and teachers in what students would be exposed to. So I'll run through a couple of those points, but I think the other good thing to just kind of think about in this context is with the thin problem slice we chose to work on, we'd identified that less than 10% of students were getting any feedback. So even if our reliability wasn't perfect, even if there was a bit of bias, depending on what it was still going to add more value to students than what they were getting today. So that was kind of another, I guess, guiding principle for us as well. So in saying that, to address that accuracy and reliability, I think the three main learnings for us around this was, one, the importance of human evaluation of the training and the tool itself, and critically reviewing its outputs. And it can't just be any human. Like you do need to find the most experienced and specialist human in your organization that can add the most value to that tool and working hand in hand with your engineers. So for us, that's very experienced educators. And it's also students. So we go into classrooms and we watch students using it in a very test environment to make sure that we can see what their inputs are, what their interpretation of the outputs are, and make our own observations and evaluations to optimize it. So that's been a really important part of our process. The other part that we have made a decision on, at least in our early iterations, is the importance of the input for the output means that we've decided to lock down what can be used with our tool that can only be part of the rest of our value proposition, so that we have almost complete control over what any fixed or more fixed inputs would be. So the only variable input is the student's writing. That's something that we will release more flexibility on, and we'll develop kind of processes around that. But that's something that we felt was important, at least while we're starting and getting that feedback and partnering with schools. And the final thing for our context around that, I guess, bias and accuracy, given we're in a educational space where we're educating young people, we see this as an opportunity to start more of a conversation around being a critical and creative thinker for students. So when we do our onboarding with schools, we recommend the discussion points to have with their students about AI, its limitations, and also to remind them that just like AI, humans are also inaccurate, bias, all those sorts of things. So it's really teaching them to always question and challenge thoughts or information that doesn't seem right to them, and have discussions about why that is. So yeah, they're probably the key three things that we've used around those kind of challenges.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. That's all great points. I really like the starting on a thin slice of value, getting that right. I think it's easy enough to think, hey, here's everything that this Gen AI technology can do. I think being really granular and sort of building from something first is a good approach, because you're probably learning a lot more that's going to inform the bigger, more complex value slices. Again, being an experienced designer, the feedback loop's always important. But I think, as you've probably experienced, even though you might be getting the right output, you put it in front of an expected user, and they're probably going to ask something you didn't think of almost immediately. And again, now you're sort of dealing with a model that may be interpreting info. So I think that really, close feedback loop and having your actual users sort of interact with it becomes, even more important. And I think, the last point, I think when we chatted about it the last time, I was like, that's a really good takeaway, is there's now a bit of a job to educate your users as well. I'm sure most people on the call probably, approach and output from a chat GPT or similar with a little bit of hesitance, but I think if I think of my parents, they would take it as truth. So I think there's definitely a new user education piece around whatever your model or your solution's outputting. I think that's a good call out. Cool. I see a question from Robert there around domain. I'm not sure how much Alex can talk to it, but maybe at the end we can try and make some space. Or otherwise, Alex, feel free to get into the text chat, Alex Z. Speaking of Alex Z, maybe we'll go to you just for I guess a wider view now. We obviously look at sort of larger organizations, smaller organizations. Do you think that the risks and benefits are sort of different between them, sort of startup versus a bigger corporate or company? And do you think there are, different, like larger blockers for a corporate versus a startup? What are your sort of thoughts on that?
Yeah, look, obviously, like I'm interacting with different types of organizations as part of the community, and in short, that there are differences between different organization types and sizes. I guess in large organizations, the benefits that they have or the advantages that they have is they have access to lots of data at scale. And they would typically have more opportunities to fund a dedicated AI team internally as well. And for large organizations, even small incremental improvements can result in huge, I guess, gains when you multiply that by the number of people that work there when you're talking about productivity use cases. But generally, I do see large organizations being more risk averse and slower to market in adapting the latest things, and this just simply has to do with things like reputation, brand, security, compliance, governance, privacy. All of these things you want to get right before you put something out to the end user. And obviously with something like Gen AI, where you can't, it's very difficult to predict what you're going to get out, what sort of output you're going to get. That reliability, interpretability becomes a crucial point that, that organizations have to deal with. Whereas on the flip side, with startups, scale ups, lots of, experimentation, faster adoption. I see them trying different models very quickly. And as you know, different models come out very often these days, as opposed to an enterprises, you may be locked into a vendor contract that kind of potentially stops you from trying different things very quickly. So, going with solutions like Amazon Bedrock, which is gaining popularity, whereas it's a model agnostic solution, you can sort of plug in different models into it, is definitely gaining popularity in this space. But I think the blockers across the board would be things like hiring AI talent or finding the right people. There's certain jobs that didn't even exist a year ago that we now have, like prompt engineers and explainability engineers and AI bot managers. And I think also for those organizations that do have legacy stacks, especially adopting their technology stack to be able to leverage the Gen AI is definitely one of the challenges they have to overcome.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. I think definitely that ability to quickly adopt, I guess, obviously as a startup, you've definitely got that. I think the potential value of let's say an older organization is then all the data they have access to, right? So if you're building something that's heavily reliant on some data, I think leaning into those, I guess, repositories and trying to find the value in that, generally, once you get through all the hurdles, can become super impactful. Cool, thanks. Couple of questions popping up. Maybe we'll just run through these the rest of the chat, and then we can see if there's any time for questions at the end. Next one for Alex Y. So let's talk about how you know when something's ready to ship to production. So I know you're in the process of evaluating the success of some of the Gen AI experiments that we did. Could you share some insights on the metrics or outcomes that you focus on when sort of making these decisions?
Sure. It shouldn't be a surprise that it's no different to any other experiment that we usually run, which is really, DVF, as we talk about, Anthony, desirability, viability, feasibility. Does it solve the customer problem in the business? So Sophie Newcomb, who's on the call now, she was one of the innovation leads on one of those POCs, and she's just planning to do a bit of a trial in center with nurses, because ultimately if it doesn't solve the problem and if it's not usable for them, then that doesn't meet the criteria that we've got to continue developing it. So we want to try and maintain that sensibility, that we don't want to get too excited about the tech, and we just want to put some good diligence behind for whoever the customer is in the business. We're not the ones to be forcing new tech down their throat, but if it solves a problem for them, but more importantly, if it aligns with the organizational enterprise technology and it's going to be supported by ICT, there's a few boxes to tick before we can sort of get to that point of, yes, we'll adopt it. In particular, one of the key insights for me through this activity is, as an organization, like we have a tendency to go, let's just buy it. And there's a lot of organizations selling solutions in Gen AI today. We don't know how they work, though. We don't know the mechanisms behind them. We don't know enough to have confidence to purchase yet. But at the same time, we're not software developers either. So how much do we invest in that, in doing more POCs and developing as well? So we're sort of at that point where, as you can see, we're testing and trying. We've done 4 POCs. We've got 3 more lined up. We're just iteratively testing and learning. At some point, we'll need to make a decision. Is this something we want to sustain and do more of in the future? And if so, how do we get that, as Alex mentioned, the capability and the skill sets to support that? Or is it that's the future, we're just going to have to be pushing or pushed in that direction?
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Alex. Yeah, I think to your point, one of the takeaways from the work we did was definitely all the learnings around the technology, right? So existing business processes, people's expectations, to go back to that DVF framework. I think there's a lot more, generally, traditionally, if we're building a more traditional web experience, you consider it. But I think now that sort of ripple on effects of, getting a model working and someone using a model, and also if it's someone in the public, there's a lot more consideration, and I think it raises some interesting questions, especially if you need to go into sort of ethical considerations depending on what sort of work you're doing. So cool. We'll go to Alina for the next one. So given the generative nature of AI, it's important to run a pilot program to gather feedback before going into production. What have been some of your biggest challenges or concerns when moving a Gen AI project from development to production, and how have you addressed these? You're muted, Alina.
Sorry, guys. I was just saying, I'm not sure if I'll call them challenges or concerns, but I'll definitely call them learnings. So yeah, in our context, as I mentioned, like working with kids, just so important to run these pilots in really safe environments where schools know that it's not the real deal, and then we're just kind of coming in and getting feedback to then improve our product. So probably like the 2 biggest, I guess, reasons for us doing that. The most obvious one is to get customer feedback and iterate quickly. But the other one is also, as a startup, we also need to understand what effort's likely to go into the product so we can learn how to resource it properly and understanding any costs related to developing and maintaining another product or a new product. But more interestingly, I guess, when we're looking at going into schools with something, we took the crappiest version of what we had. We did not have a good design for it. We knew that our tech was highly inaccurate and not reliable. But the only thing that we wanted to learn up front was, would students engage with this in the way that we intended for it to be used. Like if kids do not enjoy using something, they won't use it. And if they love using it, they'll be like, hey, miss, can we do this again? So having that student engagement was the first question that we had that we needed to prove and solve. So yeah, we took something really, really scrappy into classrooms. We went into 10 classrooms, students grades 2 to 6. We told the teacher how we would like them to integrate it into their lesson, and we just sat and observed, and we learned a lot from that. So just to quickly summarize a few of the things that we learned, the most relieving learning was that yes, students loved getting feedback in the moment and seeing themselves progress as and after the lessons being taught. Some more, I guess, constructive learnings that we had is that children and adults use digital experiences very differently. We had way too many words on a screen for students to effectively follow. We also, for lower capability students that have a lot of trouble reading, we needed that text to voice function so that they'd be able to read the feedback or receive the feedback orally in a more helpful way for them to progress. We also found that when students are handwriting, they don't tend to stop when they don't know how to spell a word, but when they're typing it, it really stops them in their tracks. So we had to rethink, okay, well, how do we make sure we keep flow through the intention of what they're learning today? Because if it's not a spelling lesson, we don't want to have them worrying about spelling. We also found out, I guess, at maths where the commonalities of our AI was being too biased and where it was pushing students towards, which wasn't necessarily a part of how we felt was best practice of how a teacher would manage that in a classroom. So instead of us just getting that kind of once or twice over here and there as we're doing our own testing, you kind of, extrapolate that and we found the real hot pockets of those areas so we could effectively iterate on those. Yeah, so they're probably the biggest ones. Students also wanted characters and, other fun animations and things on screen. So things that we knew, but unprompted received that from the students as well. So yeah, there are a few of our learnings.
That's awesome. Thank you. Yeah, I think that comfort level is definitely an interesting one that, depending on the user's, I guess, experience with using something that's AI, what it's outputting. And I think it's just going to change as well, right? As people get more comfortable, but I think the models are doing more and more. Again, to go back to the OpenAI release this morning, it seems like, voice is back on the table, which has got a lot of us designers excited. But if you can imagine all the considerations, let's just say we've sort of nailed text input, but voice is going to be a whole different thing, background noise, listening back. So yeah, I think the interface is changing, but I think that comfort level, because the user's still trying to, you still want to get the user to their outcome that they're after, right? And not make it a bit of a jarring experience. And I think even more so when you're taking an existing process that maybe someone's used to doing without AI and introducing it, there's a lot of that trust questions that sort of comes up around, okay, it's telling me this, but, I'm used to it being on a piece of paper or printed out. So, do you manage that in the UI? Do you sort of try and, keep the existing artifacts? Yeah, I think lots more things to consider for us, which is exciting. Cool. Thanks, Alina. We'll go to Alex Z for the next one. So something that we've often found overlooked on a Gen AI project is the change management process. That sort of, would need to be implemented around a new solution, whether that's an internal way of working or part of the customer-facing experience. So from your product perspective, what are your thoughts on the best way to consider this?
Yeah, look, I think that determining like if a system is correct or not can be challenging because often there is no one right answer. So in my mind, rigorously defining your evaluation framework up front is really critical for building a high quality AI system. And spending the time up front aligning what your product goals are versus system capabilities versus what your launch criteria is really important. An example of that may be, let's say your business goal is to reduce customer service cost by 300,000 through chatbot launch. Your product goal may be, I want to decrease the cost per conversation by 60% while still maintaining customer satisfaction. And your system capability may be things like efficient query processing and resolution, high accuracy, and fulfillment of the requests. And then finally, your launch criteria could be things like average handling cost reduced to, let's say, 50 cents per turn, or 90% accuracy in first time resolution. So in practice, managing AI projects is more complicated than your standard software development life cycle. It's like, some people say it's like agile on steroids. And the reason why that's the case is because you've got uncertainty in the model, and you have to take an iterative approach to model training, and just constantly experiment with algorithms and different parameters and features, which obviously causes a lot of just unpredictability in the project. You've got dependencies on the data, especially on high quality data, and you may come to the end of your project realizing that your data quality cannot deliver to your launch criteria, which means that you're going to have to go back and redo this work. There's typically more stakeholders you have to manage. On top of your engineering team, you have to be talking to AI research and data science teams, or data engineering teams. And of course, in terms of integration challenges, it's things like incorporating the Gen AI into your existing system. You would have to consider lots of different things, user experience, performance, compatibility, and things like that. So I think what I've seen kind of work well, at least in the early stages, is establishing that centralized evaluation cadence that basically what Alina was talking about, where you've got human evaluation plus your automated evaluation on top of it as well, and running A/B tests to see how your model is performing against the different tasks, and then measuring the results before you actually roll it out into the real world.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Super insightful. And I think interestingly, obviously sounds like there's a lot in that, that there is a lot more conversations that needs to happen. But I think in some ways it's a good, we all often talk about taking stakeholders on the journey. An AI product now does sort of require that input from, all the parts of the business that it's affecting. Generally, you could sort of build a tech project a little bit siloed, and it gets pushed out there and you get some content sent to you. But now these the wider business really has to engage with it and inform essentially the solution you're building, which I think hopefully gets, again, starts to build that education, gets everyone on board, and in the end gets a better, I guess, product. So
yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. Okay, I think we've got one more poll to do, which is around what people are getting excited about when using Gen AI.
We get a couple more seconds. A lot of people are still voting.
Oh, yeah, fairly well balanced. Enhancing creativity and innovation, automating routine and complex tasks, sort of up there. I think if anyone saw ChatGPT singing in the demo this morning, it's definitely why the creativity and the innovation is getting the ticks. Blew me away. Someone who can't sing, so maybe there's hope for me. Yeah. Okay, we will move on. I think we've just got a closing question, and then we might try and address some of the questions in the chat. And thank you for people who have been answering and adding a few things in there. But lastly, maybe just for each of you, for all of you on the panel, if each of you can maybe offer one piece of advice for anyone wanting to get sort of generative AI off the ground in their organization. Maybe we'll start with you, Alex Y. Sorry.
Thank you. I hate to say this, but definitely bringing the rest of the organization on the journey is, for better or worse, or it's been the path that we've taken that's worked out really well from top down, even including the board, has been great to at least broadcast that there's an interest and that it's coming. You don't have to do it with every technology, and we didn't do it for cryptocurrency. We didn't do it for a lot of other things, but the writing was on the wall with regards to this was going to slap you in the face or you enter into it. So why not, get on board and learn about it? And it's not a commitment. It's not, doesn't mean we're changing the business, but it's about helping educate everyone equally and bring them on that journey, because the minute that you're seen as the ones doing something on the side, that's never a good look and creates further walls for you. So I think it was just about equality of information and constantly sharing with the business and saying, let's all learn together and understand how we can benefit from it. So definitely not hiding away and sharing as much as possible.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. We'll go to Alex Z. Your thoughts?
Yeah, look, my thoughts is that don't expect AI to solve everything. I think that just be realistic about what AI can and cannot do, given the limitations of this technology, given the limitations of the data that you've got and the engineering resources that you have. Gen AI is not a silver bullet. Like, some problems are just better solved via reinforced learning or just simple automation of business rules. So kind of use the right tool for the job, so to speak. I also, wouldn't rely solely on AI experts to come up with use cases for your organizations. I think where you get the best value is where you pair up AI experts with your business domain experts. I think at the intersection of those two is where you get the most value for your business. So that cross-functional collaboration, which Alex and Alina talking about, this is exactly the way to go about it. And starting small, iterating very quickly. Don't expect it to work first time around. I think it's a journey that you just need to be comfortable with and continue to experiment. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. And then lastly, we'll go to Alina.
Yeah, totally agree with all the advice from the Alexes as well. Love all of that. A couple of other thoughts. I think AI is not, it's just another emerging technology. So really the best principle I always operate to is really understand your problem statement. And often it's not what you first think it is. Like, try to unpeel the layers of the onion. If there are commercial objectives and those sorts of things, try and figure out, well, what's blocking you from reaching those now, and really get targeted about those, those more specific pieces. And the other one, which is more personal to me, is just be mindful of when a human should stay in the loop. In the context of what we're in education, it's really important for us that the teacher remains the most important and empowered asset in that classroom. So giving tools to kids that takes over a teacher's job, or that does all of the work, and the teacher isn't necessarily aware of what's happening, is not good for society and not good for us as human social beings. So yeah, I would just, our context is very specific, but I just, leave you with that question to, as you're working through different things, where is it important that a human remains in the loop, and how do you design very specifically for the different roles of technology and human in the same interactions?
Awesome. Thank you all. Great insights from, some different perspectives, which I hope everyone found super useful. We've got a few minutes left. I'm inclined to start at the first questions, and maybe we'll just see if people can provide some answers to it. The first one is around Domain applying some sort of AI technology in their property search or marketing process. Not sure if you've got any.
Yeah, look, Domain's been using AI for a long time to optimize its search. I think that when you talk about specifically about generative AI, obviously that's more of a recent thing. And Domain recently released some features to help real estate agents with marketing and creating kind of a first draft of a social media post that you would use to promote a property, let's say, online. That's just kind of one example of what they're doing at the moment, but there's internal use cases they're working on as well in parallel to that. So yeah, I think there's also like another question which I might just tackle at the same time. It's also about property search and understanding the client's needs, which Robert is wondering if you feel like AI can address rather than just presenting a list of property for sale. This reminded me of a talk the chief data officer gave at one of my meetups last month, talking about the fact that we collect so much information about our customers, and typically it takes us, several months, and we probably collect hundreds of thousands different data points from which we can then, create better search experience. He actually was demoing some early prototypes of a completely different experience where using generative AI and this kind of chat interaction with the end customer, you can actually infer a lot of kind of detail and information from the customer in a lot faster, without having to wait a couple of months to collect all these data points. So I think that whole search experience is going to be quite different, in the future, because of that.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex, and thanks for the questions, Robert. I'll move to one from Stephen, which asks, so can we talk to the sustainability implications of AI, given that LLMs are very resource intensive to train? I know there's probably a few other DS experts on the call, so feel free to hop in. I think, at least from my view, and again, fairly new working in the space, generally, if we're talking about Gen AI, we're usually leaning on one of the existing big models. So generally, the OpenAI model, whatever the most recent version is. So I think at least we've been lucky that we haven't necessarily had to, well, the work's been done, the sustainability impact, unfortunately, has already happened, but we're not necessarily training the model. I think more, once we get into machine learning projects and once we sort of start, building custom models for clients, it'll definitely become a bit more of a consideration. I think, sustainability is definitely the one hand of it, and obviously more close to the business, the cost implications. But I think it's a good question. Definitely, I'm sure there's a few other experienced designers on the call from DiUS. Definitely something we should take away and maybe dig into a little bit more. So yeah, thanks, Stephen. It's a good one. Not sure if anyone had any other thoughts on the panel or just on the call around that question.
In terms of sustainability?
Yeah.
Yeah, look, AI models are, of course, they're very energy intensive to train, and it is a big consideration. But I think at the same time, I don't think every organization is gonna train their own model. I think the models will become pretty like a commodity, so to speak, that there's going to be a few organizations that will have the right resources to actually train them and produce them. But there's also all sorts of advancements that are coming out, recently, where you can train a model now on a lot less data than what it used to be in the past. New algorithms are coming out which allow you to do it in a more energy effective way. So yeah, so I think yeah, it is a kind of a double-edged sword. On one hand, you've got a process that's energy intensive. On the other hand, you kind of thanks to the different models, we're now seeing improvements in logistics and operations, and which are actually saving saving resources. So yeah, we have to be mindful of that going forward.
Hey, Anthony, just Mark here. Also, I just wanted to add to that, and some really good points already raised by yourself and Alex. But a couple of other things, just picking the right model for the job, not necessarily going for the biggest ones. So a lot of the smaller ones can also achieve the task at hand. And I think one of the things the team experienced working with Alex, why Lifeblood, is there's a lot of data pre-processing. There's a lot of steps that you can do prior to sending it to the LLM. So some really clever things to minimize what's sent to the model as well. So there's different ways that you can, kind of architect your solution to minimize overall cost as well. So all those things should be considered.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, thanks, Mark.
Continue on. Thanks. I see some good chatter happening, some little threads forming, which is great. Please put your thoughts down. This is all good stuff for us to consider going forward. Scott, you've got a couple of very pointed questions. So any ideas on AI tools for social media branding and business development? Is the one side of it. Not sure if there's any social, nothing specific comes to mind. I think, again, feels like a lot of the existing platforms in that space are now adding on their AI capability in various ways. They're sort of AI assistant, but not sure if anyone's.
Yeah, the couple that I've mentioned before, Copy AI, Jasper AI. There's a whole bunch of different tools that are out there, which increase productivity of sales, marketing, and with autonomous agents as well. I've seen examples where a job of an SDR can actually be automated to an extent where a cold outreach happens on LinkedIn, and a autonomous agent would have a conversation with the person until the appointment is booked in actually a salesperson's calendar. So I think you'll see solutions like that coming out as well.
Awesome. Thanks. Thanks, Alex. And I think Alina's also added a response there. So thank you. Oh, that was sorry to the second question around policies and procedures for organizations to use. I might just move on, conscious of time, and I'm sure people want to get on with the day. So yeah, thanks for those who have responded. Please refer to the chat. I'll move through. I think there was one just to again maybe go back to the securing funding and internal support from stakeholders. I know Alex Young, you touched on that a little bit earlier. Maybe you can just give us the one-liner takeaway or a few sentences.
Oh, which one? For the Google question?
Sorry, just so for Alex Y, just on,
sorry, for Alex Y.
Yeah, I think there was one sent around securing funding and support from internal stakeholders.
So I'm just scrolling up the list of questions. Who was that one from again?
Yeah, sorry, I think it was sent to me directly. So
okay.
Yeah, how do you go about securing funding and internal support from stakeholders?
I think that goes back to identifying who's got a problem to solve and who's motivated to fund it or support it. I think no surprises there, and it's going to be different in every organization. We're lucky enough that now we've shifted to a much better funding model and funding process. So every quarter we've got an opportunity to raise opportunities that may be strategically aligned, and it just so happened that some of these opportunities aligned, and thus we were able to get funding. Not to mention that many vendors in this space are trying to understand what use cases organizations have got. So another pathway, well, at least if you're not for profit, there's more doors that seem to open up versus in corporate life. But otherwise, it's been, once again, like any other proposition, being able to demonstrate the business impact, the problem you're trying to solve, the scale of the impact, the benefit if you do solve it, and how you think this technology will get to that solution. Keeping in mind that many technologies, there are many alternatives to solving for these problems as well. So I think it's that good old-fashioned build the case, but also say, look, for educational purposes, we're not going to build out this gold-plated thing. Let's just do a little bit. Can we get a little bit of money, and then we'll iterate, and we'll do a little bit more. We'll do a little bit more, and if you like it, we'll keep going. If you don't, we can park it. But I think once again, that iterative approach to development and testing seems to work well.
Awesome. Thanks, Alex. I think we'll probably get close to wrapping up. I see. Thanks, Diane. I saw a question, and thanks, Alina's provided a response. Maybe we'll just get the last one in. So from Luke, do you think Google will be as strong in the future now that people are using tools such as ChatGPT to get their answers? Sounds like Luke's got some experience in SEO or works in the SEO space. And a lot of marketers now have less faith in Google going forward because they're getting more accurate and personal answers from AI. I think it is an interesting shift, Luke. I guess there was a time before Google, and then Google did it right. And even before AI, I think Google was already, people were questioning it. I know, with DuckDuckGo becoming big. So I think really digging, to me, it's really understanding, why do users think, Google is less accurate, less personal? And then it's going to be, can something like ChatGPT maintain that, right? I know for those who are sort of keeping close to it, you're constantly hearing as models get tuned, people say it's becoming less accurate, or sorry, not tuned, but sort of locked down a little bit more. So a new model gets released, they get some feedback, they generally have to adjust the responses. So I think that's going to be a continuous sort of forward and back. And then you've obviously got your open source models, which, may be able to give you a bit more truthful responses, but how confronting are they? So I think, there's going to be this ongoing sort of shift across those. I'm not sure if anyone's got any other thoughts.
Yeah, just to add to that, look, if you look up generative engine optimization, GEO, which is now being discussed as the next evolution of SEO. Being able to optimize your content so that it is actually more friendly to the LLMs. Because you're absolutely right. I think the search experience is really changing. And like if you look at the latest announcement this morning from OpenAI ChatGPT, like multimodality is going to become more and more prevalent. So right now, search experience for the most part is I type my text, I get results. Whereas, if I can point the camera and in real time, show my surroundings and ask questions about, things that I see, that just completely changes the type of search experience you're gonna have. So yeah, I think that, I don't know what like how Google is gonna perform, but Google is also releasing their own, models, Gemini Pro, if you haven't tried it. In some cases, like I've gotten better results from it than from ChatGPT. So it is a close, close race, and we'll see what happens.
I just added one more thought to that in the chat, which is even pre-AI, the amount of search that's done through apps, think about TikTok, Instagram, your social apps and other apps, is proportionately growing that size of the pie as well. So there's definitely there's an interesting landscape ahead for search in general.
Cool. Okay, I'm getting told I should maybe try and wrap it up. If there are any questions that we've missed, we'll definitely come back and sort of reach out to people. But yeah, thanks for all the engagement. I think a big shout out to our guests, Alex Y, Alex Z, and Alina. Thanks everyone for hanging around, and I guess we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you, everyone. See ya.
Thanks
Well.
all. Bye.